warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. Since you're here, please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share the video as well so that more people get to know about Bharata First. Do subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team runs several quizzes. You can participate in them. If you like our content, please contribute to keep it alive. Let me also take this opportunity to inform you about Bharata First Knowledge Center, an initiative that will help each one of you in your competitive exams and transform the way you learn. Go to kc.bharatafirst.com for more details and register now. Experience a whole new way of gaining knowledge. Hundreds are already reaping the benefits of the Knowledge Center. Don't be left behind. Register right now. There's so much more that we have to offer. All this information, along with some must-see recommendations, are in the description of the video. Please go through it. Now, on to the discussion. Top security and intelligence officials of the UK, the US, and Russia made a beeline for India to discuss the situation in Afghanistan following the Taliban takeover in Kabul and the implications for regional security. Richard Moore, the head of the UK Secret Intelligence Service, or MI6, was the first of the visitors over last week, and he was followed on Tuesday by Central Intelligence Agency Director William Burns. On Wednesday, Ajit Doval met Nikolay Patrushev, the Secretary of Russia's Security Council. Patrushev visited India at Doval's invitation for high-level bilateral inter-governmental consultations on Afghanistan. The visits came against the backdrop of the old guard of the Taliban tightening its grip on power in Afghanistan a little more than 2 weeks after the group marched into Kabul on August 15th, following the chaotic collapse of the Ashraf Ghani government. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze the Taliban threat and India's options. Joining me on the program today are Major General Dhruv C. Katoch, retired Director, India Foundation; Vivek Katju, former ambassador; and Dr. Amalendu Mishra, Department of Politics, Lancaster University, UK. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Ambassador, let me start the program with you first. Let's first try and understand and analyze the present situation in Afghanistan. That, of course, is developing and is progressing with every passing day. But let's also talk about the National Security Advisor's demand and how, several other national security advisors and chiefs of intelligence agencies called upon him to try and analyze and understand the situation in Afghanistan.
Well, the situation in Afghanistan first. As I look at it, the Taliban are in control. They've created facts on the ground. There is virtually no opposition. In fact, the opposition in Panjshir from this very brave and courageous person, Amrullah Saleh, whom I've known for 24, 25 years, and I have a lot of respect for him. But the viability of his mounting an effective opposition to the Taliban is very, very, very remote at this time. So, with facts on the ground, a certain situation has to be accepted. The international community, principally the United States and its Western allies, are, I think, whatever they may say about inclusive government, etc., are not so worried about the composition of the government as they are about its policies, especially its security policies. Meaning, if it would give any kind of shelter to terrorist groups that can harm Western Europe and the United States. That is not unnaturally its first concern. As far as the other camp is concerned, quote unquote, because I see the world in two camps at the moment. There is the United States and its Western allies on Afghanistan, and there is Russia. There's China and Russia. Russia, over the last couple of days, has made some noises which show that it has developed some inhibition on the Taliban's policies, and therefore, while in the aftermath of the Taliban capturing Kabul, it said that they had restored peace, and the Russian ambassador in Kabul was reported as saying that peace in Kabul was better now than it was during Ghani's time. But now it said that it will not attend, and if there was a public ceremony for the caretaker government, it will not attend. But China, on the other hand, has clearly indicated that it's with this government. So the question now is, how will this all be navigated by the international community? As far as discussions on security affairs are concerned, let us not be unmindful of the fact that India is not in an exclusive position at the moment. In fact, India has been, and let me put it bluntly, has been marginalized in Afghanistan. Whether we like it or not, that is the situation. We had put all our eggs in the Ghani basket, and that man scooted. So whereas the Russians and other intelligence people are in contact with us, which is not unlikely because we are a major power, not only in the region but in the world, and we have concerns about Afghanistan. So these contacts are normal contacts. But at the same time, I saw a report in the Dawn today that they had arranged, the Pakistanis had arranged for a meeting of the intelligence chiefs of Russia, China, and the other neighboring countries of Pakistan. So we can't sort of at this time project that on security matters India is being courted by the international community.
Right, points taken. Let me take the points that you're making forward with the general now. General, how would you look at the West looking towards India with a lens on Afghanistan from a security perspective?
You see, today a very interesting article came out written by Ram Madhav, in which he has actually given out a proposition that we are looking at a new Cold War. And when I read that article and analyzed it, it makes a lot of sense because at one side you have got the United States and the West, you can call it as one bloc, and on the other side you have China and Russia and the people who are supporting them, Pakistan and all included. The Arab world, etc., will remain divided. Iran too will remain divided. It's not going to jump onto any particular bandwagon, as they say. But I do visualize the beginning of what we can call actually a Cold War. No longer a cold peace. It is going to be a Cold War, and the scene is going to shift really from this particular region because it holds no particular significance for the United States and Europe, and is going to shift to the Indo-Pacific. It is a simple fact that from Atlantic, the move has shifted to the Indo-Pacific, and that is why all this commotion has taken place. Now, what are the Americans' concerns? When you look at the US and Europe, they have simply one concern, as Ambassador Kaju has so clearly enunciated. They don't want terror to emanate from Afghanistan, which can hit Western targets, period. Beyond that, what happened in Afghanistan, I really don't think is their concern. As far as the other side is concerned, China and Russia, surprisingly, they have the similar aim. They also don't want any terror emanating from Afghanistan to hit China in Xinjiang, where the Uyghurs are based, and for Russia, they don't want the Central Asian republics to get radicalized because the next lot which gets impacted are the Muslims in Russia, Chechnya, etc. Pakistan, of course, in my personal view, is going to have a very rough time in the years to come, despite the fact that they are gloating as what they call a victory now. So when I look at this particular situation, I'm looking at great volatility. I disagree slightly with Ambassador Kaju when he says that there is no opposition. opposition will be there. It hasn't really come up to the level desired. That is going to take some time. In my view, it may take anything up to 6 months to 9 months to express itself. But this opposition is going to be led from the ground. And when people start opposing a particular government, especially the youth who have never seen anything different, and who will not really be too pleased with the oppressive policies of the Taliban, I think we are going to be in for, the Taliban is going to be in for a lot of surprises. As far as Indian policies are concerned, what we should do, I think I'll take it up on the next round.
Absolutely. We'll take up Indian policies in the next round and I'll discuss that at length. Let me go across to Amlindu Mishra now. And, let's analyze and understand a point that the ambassador was making earlier in the program, Dr. Mishra. He was talking about, the West and what is it that the West are really looking out for as far as Afghanistan is concerned. Let's analyze that particular issue and take that forward. What's at stake and what does the West really want to see from the Taliban right now?
There are two things here. Number one, which has already been enunciated by my other colleagues, is security. And number two is the viability of a responsible government on the ground. But that is the second priority. So the security is the dominant factor. And when you talked about security, the primary interest of the West was to evacuate its citizens and those Afghans who had worked for it. And that has almost come to a completion. There'll be some who will be left behind for good. And there is nothing that the West can do about it. Linked to that is the refugee inflow or outflow from Afghanistan, which the West, especially Europe, is terribly worried about. But that is being looked after by one of the key NATO members, that is Turkey, which has built a massive wall on its Iranian borders, which kind of virtually stops Afghans trying to flee Afghanistan to enter Turkey and then to Europe. So two primary security concerns, the country becoming a safe haven for many non-state actors, such as Islamic State of Khorasan, such as some disgruntled Islamic State elements, as well as former Al-Qaeda members. The indications are that there is going to be an infighting. The Taliban itself is not a united front. It is a divided house. There are different militant organizations working within, and they're all vying with each other to have a prominent position. So the West is also concerned about whatever is happening within the Taliban's intramural struggle spilling over and affecting the interests. And Russia is justifiably worried about it in the Central Asian regions, which has got a very soft version of Sufi Islam, and it doesn't want the last 25 years of investment that Russia has made in terms of keeping it as a buffer between whatever is happening in Afghanistan and Pakistan and its spillover into Central Asia and then to Russia. China is also justifiably worried. So there is a convergence of security interest on everyone, that this is a loose cannon, this particular regime, which doesn't know how to behave as responsible citizens. And for crying out loud, how can you take a regime very seriously when it has got a majority of members who have been in the wanted list of United Nations, FBI, Interpol, and so on and so forth? So that is a cause of concern. First of all, security. Second one is refugee. And the third one is whatever is happening on the ground in terms of women's rights, human rights, press freedom, and so on and so forth. But the challenge is not that prominent there, because since the Taliban was a part of the Doha Agreement and it has agreed to govern, so the West is not going to take a very proactive role and leave it to them to do what they want to do in the interim.
Absolutely. So, Ambassador, coming back to you now, let's take this particular aspect forward. The issue of infighting within the Taliban itself and not being able to come up with a united front. That is one. Secondly, the role of Pakistan. If you can take these two issues up.
I think you asked very significant questions, and they require some thought. But before I come to that, I've been struck by what General Saab has said about opposition to the Taliban rising from the ground. The question is, which ground will it rise? In the cities, of course, there has been a remarkable evolution over the last 20 years. There is, as I said, a young generation now, which is more integrated with the world than ever because of the social media, the net. But I think the rural landscape is quite different. And the rural-urban divide is there. Second, there is also the fact that among the non-Pashtuns are the people who can feel oppressed and rise at this Pashtun dominance, being reasserted in the most draconian way. Where is the leadership? Now, I know that movements spring up leaders, but in Afghanistan, there's never been a tradition of non-violent resistance. There can be now, but history doesn't bear that out. Now, as far as your two specific questions are concerned on the problems within the Taliban, I think they are significant. There are personality issues and there are tribal issues. The personality issues, of course, we can set aside for the moment, but the tribal issues are enormous because the assertion of the Zadran, the Haqqani network, is against the normal social and political traditions of Afghanistan and of Pashtun. The Ranis were, of course, number one. They were an authority for a long, long time, and the monarchy was theirs, both whether it was Popalzai or later Barakzai. The Giljais are a significant community, even if in the pecking order there was number two. These people from Loy Paktia, the Zadrans were nowhere. And this is the time when they are asserting themselves. So I think this contradiction will have to work itself out. The Pakistanis will try their level best that it works itself out in a manner where interests can be reconciled. But the Pashtuns have a streak of independence. It really remains to be seen how they will manage this. At the end of the day, there may be a give and take. Because my own experience of the Pashtun has been that while he has a streak of independence and it's very strong, at one level he is given to a lot of negotiation. And he has an instinct for power and its absence, like few other people have. Their war fighting, I think the major mistake all people, and General Saab will forgive me, all military sort of observers made on the situation as it evolved, was overlooking the traditions of war fighting in Afghanistan. As long as there's a balance of forces, the fighting is ferocious. But once one side gets preponderance, then history bears this out that the other side just gives up and they are given safe passage. Unless the tradition of Badal comes in. And those are personal things or tribal things that can come in and can queer this pitch of giving safe passage. Now, as far as Pakistan is concerned specifically, I think, yes, they are exulting, but I'm sure that they are aware of the complexities. And their major fear is of refugees, because despite the fencing of the Durand, they are petrified that there will be large-scale movement of refugees, and I dare say that can take place if the economic situation just collapses. And that is quite likely unless the West opens its purse strings. So it's my last point is that my guess is that the West is willing to open its purse strings because it doesn't want a Somalia happening in Afghanistan. There are drugs there that affects Europe in a major way. Refugees, I take the point which Mr. Misra has made about this Turkey fortifying itself against refugees, and that positively impacts on Europe. But refugees have a curious way of finding themselves moving, and you can't stop them. It's like a human wave. If it comes, it comes. So Europe is still worried about refugees, and of course terrorism that we've discussed.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I took some time.
No, that's all right. That's all right. You made quite a few very important points, Ambassador, as always. Thank you so very much. So, General, coming to you now, let's talk about the India angle, and to respond to the ambassador also, if you want to, a couple of occasions where he brought up your name. So, yeah, do respond to that as well, and then let's talk about this whole India aspect and what does all of this mean for India really.
Right. The first aspect which Ambassador Kaju spoke of was this aspect that the military community or the defense community, we didn't really consider this factor of Afghanis, their system of simply joining up with the other side. No, that is well known. I mean, all of us knew that very well. The question is actually quite different. On the ground, there was no collapse. The collapse took place in the minds of the president of Afghanistan and his military leaders. They collapsed before the first shot had been fired. And I think they started collapsing on 29th of February 2020, when the Doha agreement was signed, and they left the Afghan government out. So in a sense, when Ghani was looking at this entire situation, he was looking at his personal security, and he didn't want to be hung on the town square in Kabul. And that ditto for some of his senior military commanders. The second point is the strategy which was adopted by Pakistan was done by the military headquarters. It was done very well over a period of time. It was military precision planning. On the other side, from the Afghan side, I had already maintained for a very long time, this is not the way to fight a war. You don't have the troops to defend the whole of Afghanistan. You've got to defend key areas. They should have shrunk back. They should have kept the northern borders open, which they didn't. So obviously, you were heading for a collapse. But how soon it happened, that I would squarely blame the top leadership of the Afghan government, the civilian leadership, and the military leadership. They failed, they were cowards, and they must be held to account. Now, coming back to India. There are threats which I perceive which can come to India. And one of the major threats is really from Pakistan, but I want to start with that threat from Pakistan first. You see, as far as Pakistan is concerned, they send in 100 terrorists or 200 or 500 or 1,000. It is really irrelevant. The numbers are, we'll handle all of them and those dead bodies will go back. So that is not a concern, really. The larger concern to me is what happens if Pakistan becomes a Talibanized country. It is the Taliban Pakistan now. The Afghans, you have seen them running. They are trying to run to the Central Asian republics. Thousands have fled there. Thousands have fled to Iran. Thousands have fled to Pakistan. They have fled. Where will the Pakistanis go? I think the only country which they have to go is India. And I think right from now, regardless of what anybody may say, please start looking at how we can secure our borders from the millions of Pakistani refugees who would like to come in should there be a Taliban government. I have made this statement 8 years ago and people laughed at me. I make it again. Let them laugh again. But this is a reality which I think we should not forego. A Talibanized Pakistan will lead to a flood of refugees. The way Ambassador Kaju said, the problem is for Pakistan. That same problem will come to India. This is one. Number two, there has been a lot of talk in the think tank circles, in the strategic circles, which state, and I'll give you their point of view, and I don't agree with it. They say now that all the Talibani fighters, the Afghan fighters are free, they will be sent to India to fight in Kashmir. Some odd chappie has already made a statement that we'll take Kashmir, etc., etc. Okay. My simple point to all of them has been, and not one of them has been able to answer it. As of today, is there a shortage of terrorists, weapons, training areas, administrative support and leadership from the Pakistan military within Pakistan? And the answer is no. There are thousands of them lined up. Why haven't they done anything? Were they waiting for the Afghan blood to inject some life into them? No, the question is not that. Their hands have been tied. And we have tied the hands. The Indian army has tied the hands. The Indian political establishment has tied the hands with the abrogation of 370. That's a long, I can give you those arguments later if required. But basically, it's a combination of these two, which makes it very difficult for terrorists to operate. They have lost their operating bases. They have lost those linkages. And with the Hurriyat being rendered practically defunct, it is as far as I'm concerned, the Afghans are irrelevant. I don't even consider them as fighters. I've met them in 93 to 95 in actual combat. They are as cowardice as the worst of men I've seen. When it comes to their life, they will run. I've seen them running because now they are opposed by somebody who will kill them. But when it comes to defenseless women and children, yeah, they are brave. I grant them that bravery. Now, where is the threat to India? I go back now to Afghanistan being formed into an emirate. It is what they call the Emir ul Mumimin. Now that really means the leader of the faithful. And that leader of the faithful, when he gives a call to the Muslims to do something as per Islamic theology, they are bound to do it. I think that is where the danger to India comes from. It is this radicalized philosophy which can permeate into a percentage of Indian Muslims. Now, when I'm talking of percentages, I will actually give it out to you how. You see, 99% of the Indian Muslims will not be impacted, period. 99%. But 1% will be, or maybe less than 1%. But that less than 1% can actually create such serious disturbances within the country, especially in states where they have political patronage, like West Bengal and Kerala, that we can run into a great deal of trouble. We have seen what happened in the CAA. Every single action which took place there was instigated, was planned, was pre-planned, was funded from abroad.
Right.
It won't be difficult to do that again. That is something which I think we need to be worried about, not the simple aspect of a man with a gun. The man with the gun is a comfortable chap. We'll deal with him. It is the man with the ideology. That is the danger. And how we deal with that will define India's policies in the years to come. Frank.
All right. Points taken, General. Let me broaden the scope of the discussion now and bring in Amalindu Mishra into the picture once again. So let's talk about some of the other key players in the region. Amalindu, Iran has opposed the alleged actions of Pakistan, especially in Panjshir. Russia too is making noises now about what should happen and how things should transpire in Afghanistan. What's the role that you see the other players in the region playing in Afghanistan, be it the Central Asian republics, Iran, or for that matter even Russia?
I'll begin with what the general has just mentioned, and that has to do with the fact that Afghanistan becoming the center somehow of the Islamic movement and leadership, and which has got a real impact on India. And he talked about the enemy within. That's a very valid point. But now I want to look at how other Islamic states have viewed the rise of Taliban in the last 3 weeks or so. Now, there has not been any single support from the Organization of Islamic Conference, which has got 53, 54 members, if you include Afghanistan in it. They're all worried about the nature and character of this ultra-radical movement. And they've all managed to keep their distance so far. So that ideologically, they're not building any bridges with this new regime. So there has not been any kind of euphoria, so to speak. So whatever euphoria has come from individuals, as you have seen it in countries like Bangladesh, parts of India, and the military establishment in Pakistan, and so on and so forth. So they are not going to give that oxygen to the Taliban, because it undermines the very foundation of many Islamic countries. Even if they are kind of conservative, let's say, for example, Saudi Arabia, even if they are liberal, like the ones of Tunisia, it is a threat to every Islamic country. So they are not interested in having this kind of medieval mindset trying to hijack the Islamic cause. Now, the only country that I would like to bring it on board here is a very dangerous actor, which plays on both sides. It plays the good guy as well as the bad guy, good cop, bad cop. And that is the country of Qatar. Qatar is a state sponsor of terrorists. it is state sponsor of terrorism across the Middle East, from Palestine to Syria to Lebanon to Yemen and so on and so forth. So it has been very warm to the rise of Taliban, and it is not very clear what is it there in it for the regime in Doha. Perhaps it suffers from some degree of insecurity for being a microstate and so on and so forth. So that is the country that we have to watch out for in terms of the policies that it is going to follow. Then Iran is terribly uncomfortable because of Taliban's record of its treatment of Hazaras, who are a significant minority, who have been massacred, who have experienced genocide between 1996 to 2001 when the Taliban was in power. And there have also been reports of their persecution in recent weeks. So Iran is justifiably going to be worried. And if there is some kind of alliance, informal or formal alliance against the Taliban, just like the way it supported India between that particular period, it is going to support perhaps some like-minded people if it is talking about propping up some indigenous movement against the Taliban. Russia, as I have already highlighted earlier, is worried about its own southern flanks, the Central Asian republics, which act as the buffer. So the radicalization of Afghanistan, the presence of a radical violent regime, bears a kind of alarm bells for Moscow. And it is, although there were kind of some degree of warmth towards the regime, as Mr. Ambassador has already pointed out, it is wanting to distance itself. And China, we are all talking about New Delhi. There is a big talk about China taking over, making billions out of all the untapped mineral resources and so on and so forth. So let's not jump the gun here. China is a very astute player. It realizes the challenges that are there in Afghanistan. They are very conscious of history. They are a civilization stretching over 5,000 years. They have seen how other imperial powers have fared in Afghanistan. Let it be British during the 19th century, Russians in the 20th century, and now the Americans in the 21st century. So it is not that China is desperate to extend its influence. It already has got a kind of captive state that is Pakistan. It can do with it. But by jumping into the Afghan quagmire, it is conscious of the fact that it is going to get burnt very badly, especially when it shares a border with Afghanistan, the challenges it faces in Xinjiang, and the international sanctions in terms of its behavior towards its Muslim minority population. So what I would say that although the Indian media or although the Indian policymakers are terribly worried about everyone jumping into the bandwagon and supporting the Taliban regime and India missing out, I think is somewhat premature. No one is going to toss the Taliban regime with a barge pole, and we'll see that. Perhaps I would like to be proved wrong, but given my study of the country for the last 20 years or so, it is my understanding that no one is going to touch it with a barge pole, and they are going to be festered. They're going to fester and turn into a Somalia-like scenario. And I sort of completely buy into the argument of my other two panelists that it is a bigger threat for Pakistan than for India. And India has to worry about the enemy within, which has been rightly pointed out by the general, and I sort of fully endorse that particular view. So this is the Indian scenario should be how to control its own borders, how to control or manage the dissent within, and how to undermine the anti-nationals within the country who are going to benefit from the rhetoric that comes from Afghanistan and Pakistan.
All right. Time to get quick closing comments now with the best way forward from all my panelists, starting first with you, Ambassador.
I wish I was as sanguine as Mr. Misra about China. I too have studied the region for more than 2 decades. I've worked on it. 2 points. One, I do not anticipate as of now Afghanistan becoming a Somalia. I think there's too much at stake. The world has too much at stake in Afghanistan to allow it to become that. So for one, humanitarian assistance will flow. The stake of the world and of Americans lies in the fact that no one wants this to become a vacuum where there can be an enormous resurgence of international terrorist groups. So to that extent, everyone will keep engaging the Taliban. Diplomatic recognition is distant, but engagement will continue. So if Mr. Misra feels that no one will touch it with a barge pole, that well may be in terms of diplomatic recognition, but engagement, everyone is engaging them in. And even the Americans are continuing to engage them. It's not only because of evacuation exercises. Second, on China, I think the Chinese are very astute, and I agree with Mr. Mitra that they are extremely astute, and they will not make the mistakes that the Americans or the Soviets have made. But they are certainly eyeing the resources of the Hindu Kush. And they are tenacious people. They think in the long term. So we can't take a back seat and be sanguine here that somehow the Chinese will not seek to entrench themselves. We've got to be active. Otherwise, I, for one, have argued, and I believe in this argument, that we stand to allow Afghanistan and our Western neighborhood to become the playground of Pakistan in China. And we simply can't afford it. Then I don't think the Chinese will be adventurous. But if we abandon this area altogether, then what do we do, Frank? My last point, one sentence.
I have a question for you. Please add your last point to that as well. Please. You know, since we are here, very quickly, I'd like to know from you, what are India's options, or what should our options be? Is Russia our best bet in Afghanistan, looking at the present scenario?
Our best bet is India itself. Our best bet is in engaging the Taliban, howsoever distasteful, howsoever despicable we may find the ideology. But there is no escape from engagement, and I'm happy that that began in Doha, when I'm sure at the very highest level, our ambassador was authorized to receive the person who is now the Taliban deputy foreign minister, Stanikzai. So that engagement is essential. And second is that I, for one, believe that if we do this engagement properly, then in course of time, you will have parts of the Taliban at your door wishing to continue that engagement extensively. I know from history that that is how it has always played out. And my very last point is that as far as India itself is concerned, I think social peace within India is essential. And to my mind, if we link social peace with ideological predisposition, then we skate on very thin ice. Because social peace has a strategic aspect. I'm not concerned about the Amirul Momineen, and I agree with General Katochi that except for a microscopic part of maybe the Muslim community, no one will look at if Hebatullah now dons the cloak of the Holy Prophet and says, I am the Amirul Momineen, no one beyond Afghanistan will pay any attention to him. Maybe some in Pakistan, but no one did. No one took Mullah Omar's sort of announcement with great seriousness that he's the Amirul Momineen. That is not my concern. My concern is that social peace, the preservation of the social fabric, the maintenance of constitutional values is essential for our strategic interests.
Points taken. General, coming back to, closing comments from you, and, let's hear your concluding remarks. And also, as far as India is concerned, apart from safeguarding our own borders and trying to sort out our issues within, what about Afghanistan? What is our option in Afghanistan?
Right. I'll just give some very brief points. One, on 16th August itself, I wrote, it doesn't matter who puts his nose inside Afghanistan, you are playing a lose-lose game. That is going to play out. Everybody's going to lose, regardless of who it is, over the next at least 3 to 5 years. Please take it from me. There are no winners in this game. So the question is how to cut your losses. That's the way I would put it. One. Number two, as far as India is concerned, I have always supported the fact that you must engage with whichever government is in power in Afghanistan. But I don't think the Indian government should make the mistake of according them recognition. Because once you do that, you have lost the only leverage you have over those people. You have accorded them recognition, you lose leverage. Engagement on the economic front, I'm not too sanguine that the West is going to come out and open their, give them billions of dollars. It is not going to happen. The West, if you want stability and if those people are starving, well, you've got the Russians there, you've got the Chinese there, you've got the Iranians there, you've got the Central Asian republics there. They are the neighbors. They must pump in the money if they wish to. Don't expect the West. And I think it'll be, when people say, okay, the West is not giving money, I see no reason why the West should give money. As far as India is concerned, our development should be, if we have to give any aid, it has to be conditioned on the fact that it is distributed by Indian agencies to the people whom we want to give it to. Otherwise, if this aid which is given by the world goes into the coffers of Taliban, they will use it for their own purposes. The people who are opposing them will not get a penny. So I am very cautious about this aid business. If they starve, well, it's their country. If they lack freedom, it's their country. So it is their system. It is their way of life. Let them live their way of life. The world can't get too involved. We secure our borders, our social cohesion, most certainly. But that also means that if there are groups, even if it is a minuscule group which creates disturbance, then they cannot take refuge on minority status and say, I'm being targeted because I'm a Muslim. You are not being targeted because you're a Muslim. You are being targeted because you're carrying out policies which are anti the state. Now, those things have to be put very clear. Secularism doesn't mean that you can bash one community and give full freedom to the other. So it is this false sense of secularism which we have kept for 70 years, which has been the destruction of this country. We need to treat every single individual Indian equally. I have maintained that. My family has maintained it for hundreds of thousands of years. This has been the Indian tradition. This is the Indian ethos, our cultural ethos. And we broke it in 1947 by a policy of appeasement. We need to reverse that, regardless. And if we don't reverse that, then the consequences will lead to social disharmony. And that, I think, is very dangerous for India. So let us look at the long strategic perspective and let us get that strategic perspective right. All Indians are together. All Indians. That is the way I look at it. Frank.
And Amalinder Mishra, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
In the first place, let's not forget that India is a minor player. It has always been a minor player in the Afghan affairs. So we shouldn't fret that we don't have a role to play in Afghanistan. So if it is a problem in Afghanistan, it is their problem. We should not take the front seat and say that we have somehow or the other got a moral responsibility to address their problems, their challenges, and so on and so forth. Instead of us cultivating the Taliban, it should be the Taliban cultivating the relationship with India. If it is interested in having economic assistance, having social harmony, or whatever it may be, by sort of approaching Taliban and trying to be good pals with them or good friends with them, New Delhi is sort of sending the wrong signal. It should be the other way around. They should come running to India, given the fact that whatever goodwill that India had invested in the last 20 years, although it was in the wrong regime perhaps. But India's intentions were always noble. Let's not forget that. It was always trying, the very epitome of the Afghan parliament was built by India. The dams, all other forms of infrastructural developments. So India was not supporting any particular military or kind of insurgent regime during that particular period. So New Delhi should be considered according to the good work it has done in the last 20 years by the Taliban. So the Taliban should cultivate, if it is serious about getting whatever form of help or moral recognition that it is seeking, it should come to India rather than we bending over backwards to accommodate them for whatever reason. And the statements that have come out from the Taliban are not very soothing either. They have made it very clear that they take it upon themselves to call for freedom of minorities in a multinational state such as India. And Kashmir has been a prominent slogan on their part. So if we sort of give in at this particular moment, New Delhi is going to show its weakness. It should maintain a very hard position, maintain its borders, and look into whatever is happening within and address the challenges coming from within, rather than running to Taliban and feeling that somehow or the other we need to have a high table with the Taliban. Otherwise, India has lost its glory somehow or the other, and the Chinese have taken over. No, that would be a defeatist attitude. We should be very calm, patient, and think very clearly rather than becoming emotional. The Indian foreign policy is always emotional, just like all other Indians. So we have to get out of that emotional frame of mind and be very astute, perhaps like the Chinese. Thank you.
Yes, Ambassador, I saw you raising your hand. You please have the last say. Yes, please have the last say very quickly.
I do not know where this has come from, that Indian foreign policy is emotional. It is not. It has never been emotional. It's always been a very careful, whether irrespective of governments, it has always been a very carefully calibrated policy based on India's interests, cold calculations. Yes, we may have made mistakes in the past, but as someone who has been involved in and involved in the Ministry of External Affairs all through his career, I can say with absolute certainty that there is no injection of emotion when foreign policy is being framed. And as far as the Taliban and the high table, there's of course no high table here. All countries engaged with the Taliban. It is the nature of the engagement that matters. It is the substance of engagement. But in these situations, if you turn your back on engagement per se, then I would put it, and to give you a somewhat vivid image, it's like sitting in a corner twiddling your diplomatic thumbs. That never helps. It's been my experience, it simply doesn't help. These are not academic exercises, these are practical situations which diplomats and policymakers and strategic handlers of policy have to face every day to secure interests. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Well, what's coming out of this discussion is that the situation in Afghanistan has to be accepted the way it is. The West is not too worried about the composition of the government. They are more concerned about the emerging security situation and possible refugee crisis. India has been marginalized in Afghanistan and can't afford to be further left out. We have to engage with the Taliban. That is our best option for now. We should not give diplomatic recognition to Taliban yet, but we have to engage with the government of the day. Well, before I go, once again, let me remind you to like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then share the video as well so that more people get to know about Bharata First. Do subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team runs several quizzes. You can participate in them and improve your knowledge. If you like our content, please contribute to keep it alive. And let me also take this opportunity to inform you about Bharata First Knowledge Center, an initiative that will help each one of you in your competitive exams and transform the way you learn. Go to kc.bharatafirst.com for more details and register now. Experience a whole new way of gaining knowledge. Hundreds are already reaping the benefits of the Knowledge Center. Don't be left behind. Register right now. There's so much more that we have to offer. All this information along with some must-see recommendations are in the description of the video. Please go through it. That's it from me. See you again next time.